Hey guys, and welcome to the English version of my very first tutorial on my channel here. As you may recognize, the English version is a little bit shorter than the German one, and that is one reason. I can't do that much of small talk in English than I can in German. But the information in this video is directly the same as in the German one, so you don't miss anything if you watch the English version of my video. Thanks for your attention, and now have a lot of fun with the video. Hello guys, and welcome to my channel. Welcome to Cellric Aviation. Yeah, today we want to start a little tutorial series here on my channel about the SA342 Gazelle from Polychop Simulation. A few of you guys already know me, and I will do some video content of the DCS Kiowa Warrior in the future, and I will also do a little tutorial series about this nice little helicopter. I never did something like this before, so that's the reason why I want to start a tutorial series with the Gazelle now, and I really appreciate your feedback in the comment section if something is missing or if you want me to improve something. So I never did it before, and we will see. I hope you will learn something, and I guess we can start with our part now. Okay, welcome guys to the cockpit of the Gazelle. Before we start with our cockpit introduction, I would recommend that you download the English cockpit mod for the Gazelle. Normally, if you install the Gazelle, it will be in French, and there's a problem because I can't speak French. So first of all, before we start with our tour through the cockpit, I would recommend download the English cockpit mod. You can find the link to the mod in the video description, and we will now go through the installation of the mod. So guys, that's the page where you get to as soon as you click on the link in the video description. The SA342 Gazelle Complete English Cockpit Mod. You can fly on multiplayer. The integrity check is totally okay. So just click the download button and download it to any folder you want. And then we switch over and I'll show you how to install it. So now on the left hand side we have the folder we already downloaded. On the right hand side I already opened my C users, my username, saved games folder, and we need the DCS.open beta folder on the right hand side. Click to the DCS open beta folder, and there's a folder in it which is called mods. If you don't have this folder, just create one and name it mods. You don't have to install the aircraft in SA342. That's something the mod will do for you. But inside the folder we have the English cockpit. So what we're gonna do, we unzip now our file which we downloaded. I use 7-zip, but you can also use the Windows one. And now you click in it, and in there you will find 3 files. The upper one is the one you want to use, so if you click in it, there's a folder called mods. Just copy and paste it or drag it into your DCS Open Beta Saved Games folder, and now you see he asks me to replace it. I won't do it because I already installed the mod. So next we will jump into DCS and we'll have a look how to activate the mod. So here we are in DCS. It's quite simple. Just click on settings on the left top, go to the special tab, we're already in it now, and go down and look for the Gazelle. As soon as you have the Gazelle, you have customized cockpit, and you can switch from standard to English. I would recommend to do this with all the 4 variants of the Gazelle. On the right hand side we have just some check markers. You can leave it as it is after the installation. Just hit OK and go on. Okay guys, welcome back to the cockpit now with the English version. Everything that happens from now, I assume that you installed the English cockpit, so I will use the English phrases to go through all this stuff. So I will look for a view where we can see the main instrument panel so we can do our walkthrough. Okay guys, I would suggest we start at the top, walk through the instruments to the bottom. So we start at the top left. Here we have our RWR, our radar warning receiver. And that's an instrument we always miss in all the other helicopters. So it's really cool that we have the RWR in the Gazelle. But what does an RWR or radar warning receiver? The radar warning receiver shows us radar emitters. So if there's a radar which beams at us, we will get a blip on the RWR. Also, if a radar is locking us or even a missile is fired at us, we will get a warning on the RWR. But be careful, only if it's a radar guided missile. This system does not work with infrared guided missiles, but it's really cool that we have this feature in the Gazelle and it's really missing in the other helicopters. So quite cool that we have it. We will take a closer look at the RWR in the countermeasure tutorial part. On the right, we have the GNS430. The GNS430 is a navigation system also used in civil aircrafts. I won't talk too much about it because it's a special add-on you can pay for and then mount it into the Gazelle. If you like this tutorial series, maybe we can talk about it later. Okay guys, let's move forward on. On the top left on the main instrument panel we have our warning or annunciator panel. These warnings are quite critical, so that's why we have a red lamp for them. And if I switch on the battery right here and we hit the test button below the annunciator panel, we can check that all lamps are working and we can see all warnings that are available. For example, at the top we have the Pito or magnetic brake, engine, RPM, navigation, autopilot, RPM, and so on. So that's our warning panel, and we have to take a closer look if some of these lights illuminate in flight. Okay, let's move further right. We have here our VSI. And for people who already flew in DCS or also civil aircraft, they know that we always have a basic six-pack on aircraft. So in the middle of the main instrument panel, we have our artificial horizon. To the right, we have our indicated airspeed. At the bottom, we have something for navigation, so an HSI, and we have a VSI to the left, and that's not normal because normally we have to the left the altimeter, which is here at the bottom left. So these instruments are switched, I guess, because vertical speed is much more important in a helicopter. That's why these instruments are switched. And as you may recognize, all values are in meters. So it's a French aircraft, so also the airspeed indicator is in kilometers per hour, and also the altitudes are in meters or meters per minute. So this instrument has meters per minute, and you can see it is in hundreds of meters. So if you continue to the right, we have our artificial horizon. We can't uncage it right now because the aircraft is not running. The artificial horizon shows us our movement in space. So if the nose is down, if it is up, if the aircraft is tilted to the left or to the right. So we will take maybe a closer look later on in this tutorial. Okay, so if we move further right, we have our airspeed indicator. So this airspeed indicator shows the indicated airspeed. For people who are familiar or interested in, there's an indicated airspeed, a true airspeed, a ground speed. If you're interested in it, just Google it. It's now too much for our quick guide tutorial that we do here. So next will be our barometric altimeter, also in meters. You can see I can set in QNH, and the difference between a barometric and a radar altimeter, which we talk later on, is that it is the altitude above mean sea level. So it doesn't have to be zero when on ground. We are currently at Kazab, so we are near the water, so it's quite fine that we are, I guess, 3 meters above the ground. Okay guys, let's move further on to our HSI, the Horizontal Situation Indicator. So the Horizontal Situation Indicator shows where my nose of the aircraft is currently pointing at. We will talk about that in the navigation tutorial of this series, but if you take a closer look at the moment, heading shows 100, 90 would be to the east, 180 would be to the south, 270 to the west, and north 0 to the north. So currently we are looking to the east, as you can see at the sunrise. Okay, further right we have our torque gauge. So torque is a little bit like how much power you give to your main rotor. It's just said simplified, but torque has also a limitation due to the angle of attack of the blades, due to the material, due to the gearbox and so on. So there are certain limitations, and this instrument is quite important for us because with the collective and with pitch power, we set the power that is adjusted to our main rotor, as I said, simplified. And of course, we have a max power that we can use. So that's the reason why this instrument is really big and also on our main instrument panel, nearly integrated into the 6-pack. On the bottom of the torque gauge, we also have a red lamp in case of that we over torque or we are approaching the over torque of the rotor. So just keep in mind, if you have this red lamp, you have to adjust something with your power setting. Okay, let's continue with the radio altimeter. So the radio altimeter shows your height in meters above the ground. Imagine you have a little box on the bottom of the aircraft which is continuously sending out radar waves. And as soon as these waves are reflected by ground, the radio altimeter can calculate how much time it takes for the wave to come back. And with this calculation, it can tell you what your height is above the ground. So it's the counterpart to the barometric one. So the barometric one will always show you the same altitude, but if the ground is, if you have terrain or something or mountains, the radar altimeter will continuously moving while the barometric altimeter will remain steady. Okay, I just got a new view, so we continue with the line below the instruments, and thereafter we talk about the instruments on the left. So first of all, we have the wiper switch for the Copilot. Actually, it is not working. It's really bad. I would love if it is working. The pilot wiper works. The next switch, the second one, you can flip it up and down. I didn't find anything what the switch does, so if you know it, just write it in the comments and let me know. The Pito Heat is really important for our Pito tube. So the Pito tube measures the total pressure, so the dynamic and the static pressure of the aircraft. We need a Pito tube for our airspeed indicator, for our indicated airspeed. So what the Pito tube or the airspeed indicator does, it takes the total pressure from the Pito tube and subtract the static pressure, so dynamic pressure remains. If you're interested in these kind of things, please use your friend Google, you know. So we need the Pito Heat to heat the Pito tube in case of icing. Next is the hydraulic test switch. We will use it at the startup part. The next one is really important. It's the master arm switch. And we need this switch to turn on our weapons. It doesn't really matter which weapon it is. If it's the M Gazelle, the L Gazelle, the minigun, Mistral, you always will this switch switched to on as soon as you want to employ any weapons. So to the right we have our trim switch. So we want to turn trim on with the startup later on. We need the trim, of course, that we can use the trim of the aircraft for our stick. Next we have a test button for the lights. I think we switch on the battery here, and if we press it you can see that all lights are working and we can test them. So battery off again. So to continue the row, the battery of course is the battery switch we already used. Then we have the alternator and the generator. So alternator and generator are generators for electricity. So I guess, I'm not sure, alternator is for direct current, generator for alternate current. If you're interested, you know, just use Google. So in real life, if you turn on the battery and don't start the engines, you will drain the battery. So I actually didn't try it in the Gazelle, but in real life, if you switch on the battery and don't start the engines, you have a problem that your battery power is gone. So in the next row, we have our engine oil temperature here. So as you can see, it is colorized because pilots are easy guys. So you can see we have a yellow arc for the low temperatures, we have a green arc for the normal operating temperatures, and we have a red never exceed line. So as long as this needle is in the green, you are totally fine. That's what the instrument is telling you. So to the right, we have our fuel quantity gauge. This fuel quantity gauge shows you how much fuel you have in the main fuel tank. So we will talk about the additional fuel tank later in this video. So if we turn on the battery, you can see that the tank is currently completely full. Next, we have our voltmeter, and also if we turn on the battery here, you can see that the voltmeter is rising. We also have a green arc which shows us, okay, we are in the normal operating area. So currently we have 26 volts, and that is totally fine for the battery. So the battery is charged and ready to work. So let's move on to the left. As you can see, we have an second artificial horizon there, and yeah, that's it. It's a second artificial horizon. So it's a backup instrument. If the main artificial horizon will be damaged in any way, we can still use our second smaller one on the left hand side. So below that we have our lighting panel, the exterior and interior lights. On the left we have nav lights which can flash and can be steady. The nav lights, it's the same with ships, so we have a green one on the right hand side of the aircraft, a red one on the left, and a white one at the back of the aircraft. So in the middle we have the dimmer for our anti-collision light or for the beacon, especially in night environments or night operations with NVGs on. It makes a lot of sense to dim the anti-collision light so that it isn't that bright as in daylight. We have two ways to switch. So normal is 100% brightness, just normal for daylight operation, and adjust at the bottom. And as soon as we use adjust, we can use the dimmer to adjust the brightness of the beacon. So below that we have our interior lighting. So first for the console and for the panel, that's the main panel which we are currently looking at. And if I turn on the lights, you don't see anything. So I guess we have to switch on the battery first. And as soon as we do this and turn on the panel lights, you can see that it is working. We don't see the console lights, but the panel lights. And if you take a closer look, you can see that there is a backlighting of the instrument panel. So let's take a look at the exterior lighting. So we will switch on the beacon to normal daylight and the navigation to steady. And as you can see, at the tail we have the white light and the red flashing beacon, and we have on the right side the green light and the red one on the left. So if we switch nav lights now to flash and the anti-collision to adjust, and we look at the outside, you will see the nav lights are now flashing as expected. And if we take a closer look to the beacon, we can't see anything, because it is switched off, but I think I will get this in a minute. Yeah, now, so if we go to adjust and we go to about 30%, you see it is on, but not that bright. And if we turn the knob now to full, you can see we have full lighting and 100% of the beacon. So really good for night operations. So I think the tutorial is quite too long, but now we go through it. So the next row is your volume adjustment of your radios, and also in real life, the selector on which radio you want to talk. So you can adjust volume for VHF, UHF, FM, and so on. So the whole panel is for volume adjustment. If we go to the next row, you will see one of your radios. So it's your FM. If we switch on the battery and turn the knob to traffic, you will see it boot up, and we are on 30 FM. On most of the DCS multiplayer servers, 30 FM is the common frequency for helicopters, so that helicopters can talk to each other. If we move further on, you have your VHF. It's also one of the radios, so you can turn it on. You see the little green light, and you can switch frequency as desired. So to the right we have our T4, that's the temperature of our engine in degrees Celsius, and it is the same as with the engine oil temperature. As long as the needle is in the green, you are totally fine. So let's move on to the fuel tank switch. The fuel system, as I said before, is a little bit different. So we have a main fuel tank and an auxiliary fuel tank. And if you set up 100% of fuel in the mission editor or in your rearm refuel panel, then you will have the main tank and the auxiliary fuel tank filled. If you only want to fly with the main fuel tank without the additional fuel tank, then you have to set 83% of fuel. So how do I know if the auxiliary fuel tank is filled or not? Don't be interrupted, so the tracker I will move now. And if we look above our sight, there's a little gauge here, and you can see we are filled up with 100% fuel. So also the additional fuel tank is filled with fuel. So take a closer look at that little instrument at the top of the Gazelle here. So I try to reset my view here, and so how can I use the additional fuel tank? So when do I have to turn that switch on, or when do I have to turn it off? It depends on the fuel quantity in your main tank. So if you fly with the additional fuel tank and you are at 347 liters of fuel in your main tank, then you can switch on the fuel tank. If you are below 347 liters, switch on the auxiliary fuel tank and refill your main fuel tank. So this takes about 15 minutes, and as soon as the auxiliary fuel tank is empty, the little light below F.tank will go on, and then you can switch off the additional fuel tank and you transferred the fuel from the auxiliary fuel tank to the main fuel tank. So it's a little bit complicated, but I think you guys will get to manage that. So next is our convoy tank. I actually don't know what it is. I think a convoy tank is an external fuel tank. It is not modeled in DCS at all, so we can't use it. Next is our sand filter. It is implemented since, I guess, 3 weeks now, and I really recommend to use it. So you can equip the sand filter via the rearming and refueling screen via your F10 menu. It is on, I guess it is station 5. So use it as soon as you fly in a desert environment like Persian Gulf, Nevada, or Syria. So if you don't do it, you can damage your engine. I don't know the exact values, but it is highly recommended to use it and to turn it on. So the next switch we talk about is the magnetic brake, which will also be turned on with the startup, which we do later on. The magnetic brake is used to trim our cyclic. So we have a trim button, and we can put the cyclic in a position and hit the trim button and use the magnetic brake for trimming. The alternate and gen rearm are not implemented, and I don't know what they are doing. So in the next row we have our starter button. If we flip the switch to the up position, we have the normal start process, and to the right we have the fuel pump. We can also vent the engine, but that's a different kind of stuff. The next is a normal clock where we can select the dial, we can start our stopwatch, we can stop the stopwatch, and we can also reset the stopwatch. Wow. The next is our RPM and turbine and rotor RPM gauge. This is also very important during the startup because we first start the engine and then we have to adjust our rotor. So if you do this too quick, your rotor will just blow off, but that's something we will go through in a later stage of this tutorial series. So let's continue with the last row. It is our Autopilot Panel. Yes, the Gazelle has a really good autopilot, which can hold your altitude or your speed. Also, with the startup, we will turn on the autopilot and also switch on the dampers, which are needed for the autopilot to work. So the pitch, the roll, and the heading dampers. The autopilot switch actually doesn't work because we don't have electricity. To the right we have our UV lights. That is also a kind of backlighting. As you can see, a little blue backlighting. I think UV lights are dimmable. They are for night operations and for NVG operations. So guys, last but not least, on the left hand side, I nearly forgot it, we have our gyros. The gyros are needed that the autopilot is working because we need gyros so the autopilot knows in which kind of flight state we are. We have to align the gyros with the startup. It takes about 1 minute, so it isn't that long. And we can also use a test switch here, but we also need electrical power for that. So we can take a closer look later on. So guys, let's come to the last part, to the middle console. We have our nadir here. We will talk about that in the navigation tutorial. We just will switch it to ground after the startup, but we take a closer look later on. In the middle we have our armament panel, and this panel really depends on which version of the aircraft you are flying. Currently we are in the L Gazelle. Also the Mistral Gazelle looks similar, but the M Gazelle and the minigun Gazelle, they have different armament panels and different placements of the gauges. So we have a counter at the top, which we can switch on. So it will show us the amount of rockets we have. It will show us the amount of gun rounds we have, or if we are flying in a Mistral, of course, how many rockets are on which rack. We also have master arm switches, so of course we have to turn them to arm if we want to use one of our armaments. So in this case, in the L Gazelle, the gun and the rockets. Below that, we have one additional radio. It's our UHF here, so also for communication. And we can just try out if it is working. So 252.000, validate, and you see we switched the frequency. Below that we have our ADF, our automatic direction finder, which is used for tracking NDBs. We will take also a closer look to that one in the navigation series. To the right we have our countermeasure panel. Also we will have a closer look in a later part of the series. Our flare dispenser, and yeah, I think we will, because of the duration of the video, we will delay that one. Next we have a closer look to our collective. The servo switch isn't modeled and I can't find any documentation about it. I don't know what the servo switch does. If you try to click it, you just get the click spots from the ADF below the collective. If we look to the right of the collective, there are switches that are working. I have them on my Thrustmaster Warthog, so we can turn off and on our landing lights, and we can also extend and retract it, so we can tilt it up and down. To the right, one of the most important switches is this yellow and black striped switch. As soon as we start our countermeasures, and for me I do it with the startup, I want to have this switch open, because if you don't open it, you are unable to dispense any flares. So keep in mind, if you want to push the button, you have to open the cover. So here in the back we have our Iff panel, identify friend or foe. It is not modeled or implemented. We can't use any switches on it, so I think we won't go into deep with that, but it's cool that we have it textured. So next will be our cyclic, and if we take a closer look, we have an autopilot button, we have a slave button, we will also have a magnetic brake and an auto hover button. We will go through the keybinds in one of our future parts of this tutorial series. If we go to the left seat, we also have a lot of buttons. We can use lasing button and missile launch button and so on. This is our visual cueing system, which we have on our roof and which we can control. You can see it here on the top. There's a little visual sight, and I think we talk about that as soon as we want to employ the weapons in the Gazelle. So guys, I think we made it through, and yeah, thank you very much for watching. It's now 30 minutes. It is a lot for a cockpit tour. I try to keep the next parts a little bit shorter, and thank you very much that you looked the whole 30 minutes until the end. I hope to see you soon in the next parts of the Gazelle, and then in the future, of course, also with the Kiowa. And please leave me a feedback, what was good, what was not so good, in the comment section below. Thank you very, very much. See you next time.